When my husband passed away, I thought the world had already taken everything it could from me. But the phone call I received that night proved me wrong. The man introduced himself quietly. "Mrs. Green. This is Andrew Caldwell, your husband's employer. I found something. Please come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. And, don't tell your son or daughter-in-law. You could be in danger." Danger. The word tightened around my chest. But he insisted it was what my husband wanted. If you love real emotional stories, hit subscribe. We post one every day. I arrived at the office the next morning with shaky hands and a determination I didn't know I still had. I'd already spent 3 days watching my life shrink around me, from the front pew at Thomas's funeral to the far corner of my own living room, where my son and his wife seemed to be making decisions as if I were a confused guest instead of a grieving spouse. My son, Daniel, had spoken to me in that softened, patronizing voice he'd developed since marrying Brittany. "Mom, let us handle everything. You just focus on staying calm." Calm. As if losing the man I'd spent 42 years with was something I could soothe with tea and quiet corners. At the funeral, people approached Daniel and Brittany with sympathy as if they were the ones who had shared a lifetime with Thomas. I sat there listening to whispers about how fragile I must be. Thomas had never treated me that way. I was his partner in everything. But since Brittany entered our lives, I'd felt myself slowly pushed out of my own family. After the burial, our home felt unrecognizable. Brittany acted like the hostess of a mansion she'd inherited, offering me rest I didn't ask for and tea I didn't want. And then Daniel sat across from me, gently explaining that the house was too big for someone my age, and that they'd found luxury senior living communities that would be better for me. I refused. They pushed. I weakened, but only for a moment. Then the phone call came that night. Andrew Caldwell. A name I knew. The man Thomas respected. The man he trusted. He told me something had happened in the last few months of Thomas's life, something he could not say over the phone. Something Thomas had predicted. Something Thomas wanted only me to hear. By morning, I felt Thomas's presence pushing me forward, urging me to be stronger than the image Daniel and Brittany had tried to sculpt. I dressed in the charcoal suit Thomas always said made me look sharp enough to scare away trouble. Daniel called again, checking in too often, too intently. When I told him I needed to go out, he demanded to know where. When I lied about the pharmacy, he offered to go for me, insisting I stay put. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. I left the house without telling him anything. I drove with my jaw clenched, watching the city rise in front of me, including the tall glass building where Thomas had spent 3 decades of his life. Now I was walking inside alone, my heart pounding, wondering what secrets he had left behind, and why he hadn't trusted our own son with them. Andrew Caldwell's office felt like another world, all glass, height, and quiet authority. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled sunlight across polished mahogany, and everything smelled faintly of leather and power. When he rose to greet me, his expression carried something I hadn't seen in days, genuine concern. "Mrs. Green, thank you for coming. Please, sit." I sank into one of the leather chairs, my palms damp. I had no idea what Thomas could possibly have hidden from me, or why Andrew had warned me to tell no one. "First," he said softly, "your husband was one of the most trusted people in this company. In 30 years, not once did we question his integrity." His tone shifted. This was the build-up, not the message. He opened a drawer and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. My heart stuttered. "In the last 6 months," he continued, "Thomas came to me several times with concerns." "Concerns about what?" I asked, though a coil of dread was already tightening inside me. Andrew hesitated, then looked me dead in the eyes. "About your family." The room tilted. "My family? Your husband believed your son and daughter-in-law were pressuring him to make major changes to his will and banking arrangements. Changes that would give them immediate control if anything happened to him. That's not possible, I whispered. Daniel would never. Andrew gently slid a document toward me. A photocopy of a power of attorney transfer. My husband's signature was there, crossed out with a firm line. 3 months ago, Daniel brought this to him. Begged him to sign. Said it was, for your own good. When Thomas refused, Daniel grew upset. Told him he was being selfish. My stomach dropped. Memories surfaced, hushed conversations stopping when I entered a room, Brittany's soft voice insisting I seemed forgetful lately. Andrew flipped to another page. Thomas said Brittany had begun suggesting you were showing signs of confusion. That you were repeating yourself. That you might need medical supervision. A tremor ran through me. That is a lie. My mind is perfectly fine. Thomas knew that. That's why he documented everything. Dates. Times. Exact conversations. He wanted a record in case anything escalated. Tears blurred my vision. Why didn't he tell me? He hoped he was overreacting. He didn't want to frighten you unless he had proof. A sudden knock shattered the moment. The door swung open. Daniel and Brittany stepped inside. Both froze at the sight of me, and that thick folder on the desk. Mom? Daniel asked, his voice sharp, not concerned. What are you doing here? Brittany moved forward with that syrupy smile she used on strangers. Margaret, sweetheart, we were worried. Why didn't you tell us you were coming here? Andrew stood, tension radiating from him. This was a private meeting. I'd appreciate privacy. Brittany's laugh was brittle. With all respect, Mr. Caldwell, Margaret hasn't been herself lately. She needs family close by while she's making important decisions. Something inside me snapped. I am not a child. Daniel shot me a look, the same look he'd worn at the funeral, that strange mix of calculation and something darker. Mom, he said, lowering himself into a chair as if to soothe me, people can manipulate widows. Especially when money is involved. I felt every word burrow under my skin. Money? Is that why you're really here? Brittany perched beside me. We only want to protect you. Thomas's life insurance, the house, the accounts, there are people who would take advantage. My breath stopped. How do you know about the life insurance? A flicker of panic flashed between them. Well, Daniel stammered, Dad talked to us about it months ago. Just planning. Making sure you'd be taken care of. Funny. Thomas had said nothing to me. Silence thickened, heavy and electric. Then, from behind the closed door to the private bathroom, we heard it. A cough. Not just any cough, a cough I knew as certainly as my own heartbeat. My blood froze. The bathroom door handle turned. The world held its breath. The bathroom door opened, and the world stopped. Thomas stepped out, alive. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. My vision blurred, my ears rang, and I felt my soul trying to tear its way out of my chest. Hello, Margaret, he said softly. I don't remember standing. I don't remember screaming. I only remember falling into his arms as my hands touched his face, his shoulders, the warmth of him, proof that I wasn't hallucinating. Thomas. I whispered. You're alive. Behind us, Brittany let out a sharp gasp. Daniel muttered something foul under his breath. Thomas held me close, steadying me like he had done 1,000 times before. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I know what this has put you through. But it was the only way. The only way to what? My voice shook. His expression hardened as he looked at Daniel and Brittany, so cold, so unlike the gentleman I had known for decades. The only way to protect you from them. Daniel finally snapped out of his shock. This is insane. You died. We saw your body. There was a funeral. A death certificate. Thomas stood taller, the calmness in his voice almost terrifying. What you saw was a staged cremation arranged with the help of a doctor who specializes in discreet matters. And a funeral director who owed Andrew a favor. My knees almost buckled. Why would you do something like that? Thomas didn't look at me first. He looked directly at our son. Because I found out exactly what you two were planning. Brittany blanched. We have no idea what you're insinuating. Thomas walked to the desk and flipped open the folder Andrew had set aside earlier. He laid out emails, text messages, and typed transcripts. He read aloud, Margaret is showing early signs of confusion. If Thomas signs the documents we prepped, we can arrange full-time care. With the house worth nearly $500,000, it would give us enough cushion to handle everything. I felt something sharp twist deep in my chest. Daniel's face drained of all color. Brittany looked like she was about to faint. Thomas didn't slow down. You planned to have your mother declared incompetent so you could get control of her assets. That was the goal, wasn't it? Daniel swallowed hard. It's taken out of context. We were worried about her. We were trying to plan responsibly. Planning? Thomas snapped. You were calculating how fast you could put her into a facility so you could sell our home. Brittany stood abruptly, her mask cracked and gone. This is ridiculous. Faking your death is a crime. You're going to face charges, Thomas. All of you will. You're right, Thomas said calmly. I'll deal with that. But not before Margaret knows the truth. He came back to me, kneeling so our eyes met. For 8 months, they've been visiting me when you weren't home. Every conversation was about convincing me you were losing your mind. That you couldn't handle decisions anymore. Daniel flinched. Thomas continued, they told me it was selfish not to put our finances under Daniel's control, for your own good. I turned to my son, my only child, the baby I once held against my chest. Is this true? I asked quietly. For a second, I saw guilt flicker across his face. But then it hardened into something colder. Mama, you don't understand the pressure we're under. We have debts. Real debts. So it was true, I whispered. Thomas squeezed my hands. A private investigator traced everything. Daniel, you have gambling debts over $150,000. Daniel's jaw clenched. And Brittany, he added, turning toward her, you've been using credit cards in Margaret's name. My mouth went dry. Credit cards in my name? Thomas nodded. 3 different ones. Running a balance of more than $10,000. Brittany exploded. Enough. This is absurd. You're making up stories because you've finally cracked. Margaret, let's go. Clearly your husband is unstable. But I didn't move. For the first time in years, clarity cut through me like a blade. They hadn't been protecting me. They had been grooming me. Preparing me. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice steady. But you two need to leave. Daniel's expression twisted into something unrecognizable, rage mixed with fear and desperation. The look of a man realizing the plan he'd built his future on was crumbling. Thomas guided me to the sofa as Andrew returned with water. His face was grave, he already knew everything. Daniel and Brittany hovered near the door, looking like predators deciding whether to lunge or run. Thomas knelt again beside me, his voice quieter now. Margaret, there's more you need to see. Andrew pulled out another set of photos. These were taken over the last 6 weeks, Thomas said. My hands shook as I lifted the first photo. Daniel entering a casino. Another, him at a poker table, stacks of chips in front of him. A third, Brittany trying on a diamond necklace, one I had never seen. Daniel, Thomas said, his voice like ice, would you like to explain how you bet $25,000 in a single night when you told me you were struggling to pay bills? Daniel didn't answer. And Brittany, Andrew added, sliding forward another receipt, would you like to explain how you purchased a $4,000 necklace using a credit card in Margaret's name? Brittany's face twisted. You have no proof that's real. Andrew's brow lifted. It's the official receipt. We verified the charge with the bank. I stared at them, two people I had welcomed into my home, into my life, feeling something inside me break. They didn't even look ashamed. Just angry they'd been caught. I looked at Thomas. What happens now? He took my hands, and for the first time since he walked out of that bathroom alive, I saw fear in his eyes. Now, he said quietly, we decide how to protect you, for real. I felt the floor shift beneath me, as if someone had yanked reality out from under my feet. You used my name to buy jewelry, I whispered. Brittany froze. For the first time since I'd known her, the polished, perfect mask she always wore fractured. Margaret, you don't understand, she said, voice trembling. Daniel and I have been under impossible pressure. His loans, the bills, everything is piling up. We just needed a little help. Something temporary. Temporary? The word scraped out of me. How long have you been stealing from me? Andrew rose slowly, pulling a thick document from the folder on his desk. According to our investigator, the fraudulent activity began 18 months ago. My stomach dropped. You used her personal information to open 3 credit cards, he continued. You made unauthorized withdrawals from her savings totaling more than $1,000. And you intercepted her financial mail to keep her unaware. Intercepted my mail. I turned to Daniel. You went through my private letters. Andrew nodded. Do you remember when Brittany offered to help organize your accounts a few months ago? When she said it would be easier if she handled everything so you wouldn't get overwhelmed? The memory hit like a blow. Brittany's soft voice. Her gentle hand on my shoulder. Let me take care of the paperwork, Margaret. You don't need the stress. I felt sick. And that, Andrew said, his voice dropping, isn't the worst of it. I stared at him. What could be worse than this? He looked directly at Daniel. Tell your mother about the plan for the assisted living facility. Daniel's face drained of all color. I don't know what you're talking about. Andrew didn't argue. He simply reached into the drawer and pulled out a small recorder. Then we'll let your own voice speak. He pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the office, sharp, impatient, unmistakably his. We need to move the timeline up. Dad is suspicious, and Mom isn't acting as confused as we wanted. My heart stopped. Brittany's voice followed. I already spoke to the director at Willow Haven. Did you get the medical files we need? The forged documents are ready. Once she's admitted, we can list the house immediately. Prices are high right now. My entire body went cold. Forged documents. The recording kept going. What if someone pushes back? Brittany asked. Dad won't be a problem much longer, Daniel replied. The tone in his voice, flat, deliberate, made something inside me collapse. Andrew shut off the recorder. Silence wrapped around us, heavy as wet wool. I looked at Daniel, searching desperately for a lie, an explanation, anything. Dad won't be a problem much longer, I repeated. What does that mean? Daniel swallowed. Mom, you're twisting everything. Dad was stressed. His heart wasn't great. We were being realistic. Andrew stood. Realistic. That recording was made 3 weeks before Thomas died. Brittany stepped forward, her sweetness gone. Stop being dramatic. We were planning ahead. Margaret, eventually you'll need care. Better to sort things early than let things fall apart. Plan ahead, I whispered. Or, accelerate the situation. Andrew placed one more file in front of me. A medical report. The words blurred as I read them. Early dementia. Episodes of confusion. Memory impairment. Recommended full-time care. This isn't real, I said. I've never met this doctor. Who even is Dr. Rowan Hale? He's Brittany's physician, Andrew replied quietly. He took $10,000 to sign a false diagnosis. I stared at Brittany, the woman I had embraced as a daughter. You paid someone to declare me incompetent. Her eyes flashed with desperation. We were protecting you. From what? I cried. From yourself, Daniel snapped. Mom, you're older. You forget things. Brittany and I see what you don't. I felt my son slipping away from me with every word. Andrew stepped between us. Margaret has no cognitive issues. You've spent more than a year gaslighting her, manufacturing mistakes to make her doubt her mind. Gaslighting? I whispered. It means, Andrew said softly, intentionally making someone question their reality. He looked at me gently. Do you remember when you couldn't find your car keys, and Brittany suggested you misplace them because you were getting forgetful? I nodded, heart thundering. They were found in Brittany's purse, he said. I felt the room tilt. And when you lost your medication, he continued. That was in Daniel's car, Andrew said. Every mistake you blamed on aging was arranged. He listed each incident. Each doubt. Each fear. Each moment I thought meant my mind was failing. They had staged all of it. For money. For my house. For control. I looked at them, my son, the love I raised, and the woman he had brought into my life. Their faces were strangers. Why? I whispered. We're family. Brittany laughed, bitter and sharp. You and Thomas sat on everything, this house, the money, while we struggled. We deserved better. You never asked, I said weakly. We didn't want your charity, Daniel snapped. We wanted what's ours. You're going to die eventually. What difference does it make? My soul cracked. In that moment, I lost my son forever. But something else happened, too. For the first time in over a year, my mind felt clear, crystal sharp. I wasn't confused. I wasn't ill. I had been prey. And now that I finally understood, I would never be silent again. In the days that followed, Thomas stayed in a secure hotel while Andrew handled the legal aftermath of his miraculous reappearance. I returned home, and for the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a cage. Daniel and Brittany had left Andrew's office in rage and disbelief. But I left as someone reborn. Someone awake. I hadn't heard a single word from Daniel or Brittany for 2 full days. Then, at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, their car pulled into my driveway. I watched them from the living room window. Daniel marched up the walkway with that familiar determined stride, the one he'd had as a boy whenever he was about to lie his way out of trouble. Brittany trailed behind him, but her posture was different this time, tighter, guarded, rehearsed. I opened the door before they could knock. Mom, Daniel said, voice painfully controlled. Daniel. Brittany. My tone was cool as stone, and I didn't bother changing it. Can we come in? Brittany asked. We need to talk. I stepped aside but didn't invite them to sit. The living room, our Christmases, our birthdays, our family photos, felt like neutral ground before a war. Daniel cleared his throat. We've been thinking about everything that happened at Mr. Caldwell's office. I'm sure you have. Brittany stepped forward with a soft expression she used the way other people use tools. Margaret, there were so many misunderstandings. Yes, we've been worried about you, but everything we did because we love you. The best intentions, I echoed. Like opening credit cards in my name. Daniel spoke too fast. Those were for emergencies. Unexpected costs. For your care. For my care, I repeated. Like the $4,000 necklace. Brittany exhaled dramatically. Okay, that was a mistake. But you have no idea how much pressure we've been under. Your pressure, I said, is not my responsibility. Daniel's jaw tightened. He shifted tactics, just like he used to do in school when a teacher caught him cheating. Mom, you're letting Dad get into your head. Doesn't it bother you that he faked his own death? What normal man does that? The kind of man trying to shield his wife from a son planning to take everything she owns. Daniel snapped. We weren't stealing. That house, the money, it was going to be ours eventually. We were just accelerating things. We needed help. The bluntness of it knocked my breath out. So, I said quietly, you've been waiting for Thomas and me to die, and you're angry the timeline wasn't fast enough. That's not what we meant, Brittany blurted, panic flickering. Families make plans. Families don't pay for forged medical evaluations to declare someone incompetent. Her face drained of color. That was, just in case you needed care later. In case? I asked. You paid Dr. Hale $10,000. Daniel ran both hands through his hair, the universal sign he was losing control. Mom, you sound paranoid. Dad is feeding you nonsense. Nonsense, I repeated. Like the idea that I deserve to stay in my own home without being tricked into a facility. No one wanted to declare you unstable. Daniel yelled. I walked to the phone and picked it up. What are you doing? Brittany demanded. Calling Thomas, I said. We're having this discussion together. Mom, don't, Daniel started, but it was done. Thomas arrived 20 minutes later, calm as a storm cloud. The moment he stepped inside, the air thickened. Daniel. Brittany, he said evenly. Dad, Daniel replied, forcing politeness. We need to resolve this as a family. Thomas sat beside me and took my hand. I'm listening. Brittany perched on the edge of a chair, adopting her most fragile posture. Thomas, I know this looks terrible, but we were desperate. Explain it, Thomas said. Daniel spoke quickly, as if speed would make the words less ugly. My debts got out of control. I thought I could fix it fast. Gambling. Loans. Then everything collapsed, and we didn't know what else to do. So you turned to your parents, Thomas said. By stealing. It's not stealing. Daniel shouted. You have more than you'll ever use. The house is too big for you. We were just moving things forward. Moving things forward by having me declared incompetent. I asked. Brittany began to cry. Not grief, performance. I recognized it now with painful clarity. We never wanted to hurt you, she said. We just wanted to make sure you were safe and we could survive financially. By draining my accounts and sending me to Willow Haven against my will. It's not a nursing home, Daniel muttered. It's a nice place. It would have been a prison, I said. You would have adapted, Brittany whispered. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like the house was holding its breath. Thomas stood slowly. Daniel, listen to me very carefully. For a second, a tiny, flickering second, I saw my son look at his father the way he once had. With fear. And hope. But that child was gone. Your mother and I, Thomas said, are done with you. You are no longer part of our lives. You will not contact us. You will not come to this house. You will not have access to anything we own. Daniel shot up. You can't do that. I'm your son. You are my biological son, Thomas corrected. But you stopped being family the moment you decided our deaths would be more convenient than our lives. Brittany's tears instantly vanished. This is insane, Thomas. You can't cut us out. We're your family. No, I said, rising. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't hope you die so they can upgrade their lifestyle. Daniel's face twisted into something I had never seen before, raw resentment. You know what, Mom, he said quietly. Maybe this is for the best. I was tired of pretending to care when all I really wanted was for you to get out of the way. The words should have destroyed me. Instead, they set me free. Leave, I said. Pack whatever you brought into my home, and get out. Gladly, Daniel said. But this isn't over. We'll go to court. We'll prove Dad faked his death. We'll prove you're not mentally competent. Thomas smiled, and it was not a gentle smile. And you can explain to the judge why you forged medical documents and planned to commit fraud against your own mother. I'm sure he'll be fascinated. Daniel and Brittany exchanged a single, panicked glance. This isn't over, Daniel said again, but his voice had lost all power. Yes, I said softly. It is. I watched them walk out of my house, my son, and the woman who helped break him, knowing it was probably the last time I would ever see either of them. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt safe. I should have felt grief. Instead, what settled over me was a quiet, steady relief, the kind that sweeps in after a long storm finally breaks. For the first time in more than a year, I felt air in my lungs. I felt free. 6 months later, I'm on the porch of our new cottage, watching Thomas kneel in the dirt as he plants the rose bushes he'd always dreamed of tending. We moved to Redwood Springs, a small mountain town 3 hours from everything we used to know. Here, we're simply Thomas and Margaret Green, a retired couple settling into the gentlest years of their lives. No whispers. No accusations. No shadows from the past trailing behind us. The transition wasn't seamless. In the early mornings during our first weeks here, I sometimes woke with a sharp ache in my chest, momentarily wondering if we had made a terrible mistake. Cutting Daniel out of my life, truly severing the connection, felt like removing a limb. A poisoned limb, yes. But a limb I had carried for 35 years. Thomas would always find me sitting on the edge of the bed, my thoughts spiraling toward guilt. My love, he'd say, pulling me against his shoulder, you cannot save someone who is willing to carve you apart. The legal process had been messy. Andrew Caldwell helped us navigate the corporate fallout, and our attorney managed the rest. Falsifying Thomas's death certificate earned him fines and community service, and plenty of stern looks from officials, but once evidence of Daniel and Brittany's conspiracy came out, the tone shifted. The judge reviewed fraudulent credit cards, coerced medical papers from Dr. Rowan Hale, and documents meant to force us into Willow Haven, an assisted living facility they could control. I've seen elder exploitation, the judge said bluntly. Rarely this calculated. Daniel and Brittany threatened to drag us to court, but the district attorney quickly pivoted to them. Within weeks, criminal charges were filed, not against us, but against the two people who had been prepared to dismantle our lives piece by piece. The last I heard, Daniel received probation for financial fraud. Brittany lost her nursing license. Their marriage shattered 6 weeks later, each blaming the other for the ruin they had created. I did not feel triumph. I felt closure. Like placing the final page of a heavy, unpleasant novel back on a shelf where it could no longer reach me. We sold the house Daniel grew up in. Too many rooms filled with soured memories, too many corners that echoed with arguments and unspoken tensions. With the money, we bought a modest home in Redwood Springs, just enough space for us, a garden for Thomas, and a porch where I could watch the sun crawl over the mountains every morning. We also chose to clear the debts Daniel and Brittany had opened in our names. Not because we owed them anything, but because we deserved a clean beginning, one unchained from past entanglements. One evening while chopping vegetables for dinner, I asked Thomas, "Do you think Daniel will ever understand what he did?" Thomas looked up slowly, his face lined with a wisdom he'd earned through pain as much as age. "I don't know," he said softly. "But it's no longer our burden to teach him." That was the harshest truth I've learned in all of this. For decades, I believed my role was to carry Daniel's weight, to shepherd him no matter where he wandered. Even after he married, even after he grew cold, even after the threats began, he was still the boy who once placed sticky handprints on my skirt. But some grown children choose roads their parents cannot follow. And sometimes love means stepping aside. We made new friends here. Brenda and George from next door invited us to supper last week. Over dessert, Brenda mentioned they, too, had cut ties with their only son. He was destroying himself, she said simply, and taking us with him. Was it hard? I asked. George squeezed her hand. Hardest thing we ever did. But it saved our lives. I hadn't known how desperately I needed to hear that we weren't alone. Yesterday morning, Thomas brought me coffee, a small ritual that has become the rhythm of our new life. Beside the mug was an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "It came yesterday," he said. "From Daniel." My heart hesitated. "You didn't read it?" "It's yours." I held the letter for a long while before opening it. The handwriting was familiar, but the tone belonged to a stranger. "Mama. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. Kira and I divorced." He wrote about therapy. About gambling. About entitlement. About reaching a point where harming the people who raised him felt justified. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I finally see what I did. If one day you want to give me another chance, I'll spend the years ahead trying to be the son I should have been." I passed the letter to Thomas. "What do you think?" he asked. "He sounds like someone trying to change," I admitted. "But words are easy." Thomas nodded. "And what do you want to do?" "Nothing," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "I want to keep living our life. If he proves himself someday, we'll decide then. And if he never does." I looked out the window. Thomas's roses had begun to bloom, their soft petals opening toward the light. "Then we'll still have a beautiful life." That afternoon, I wrote a letter, not to Daniel, but to myself. A declaration of release. Dear Margaret. Forgive yourself for loving until it hurt. Forgive yourself for trusting until it nearly broke you. Forgive yourself for believing that being a mother meant sacrificing everything. And be proud that you finally chose yourself, and a future worth living. That night, lying beside Thomas in our new bedroom overlooking the mountains, he asked quietly, "Do you regret any of it? Cutting him off. The faked death?" I smiled into the darkness. "It was dramatic," I admitted. "But effective." Thomas laughed. "Extremely effective." A soft silence settled between us, the peaceful kind, the kind we had fought so hard to earn. "You know the strangest part?" I whispered. "What's that?" "I feel younger now than I have in decades. As if I've finally put down a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying." Thomas found my hand and laced his fingers through mine. "That," he said gently, "is what happens when you stop living for others, and finally start living for yourself." This morning, the phone rang just as I finished my first cup of tea. It was Brenda, our neighbor with the bright laugh that carries over the fence. Margaret, she said warmly, a few of us are heading to the farmer's market on Saturday, and afterward we're trying that new French cafe everyone keeps talking about. Will you join us? Yes, I answered without a second thought. Not long ago, that question would have sent me spiraling, wondering whether Daniel or Brittany needed anything, whether it was responsible or proper for me to spend a morning with friends. I lived in constant obedience to expectations that were never mine. Now, my life fits differently. I say yes to things that stir joy instead of anxiety. As I jot these words down on the porch, Thomas is nearby, humming softly as he waters the rose bushes he planted with such care. The mountain air is cool, my tea is warm, and for the first time in decades, I feel something simple and extraordinary. I am free. Free of guilt. Free of being managed. Free of explaining myself to people who cared more about control than about love. Daniel once said Thomas and I didn't have many years left. Maybe he was right. But the years we do have will be lived on our own terms, quietly, honestly, surrounded by people who wish us well rather than plotting behind our backs. I've learned that losing a toxic connection is not a tragedy. It is an unburdening. Sometimes the bravest thing any parent can do is release an adult child who refuses to stop causing harm. Tonight, I know I'll sleep deeply, for the first time in 2 long years. And tomorrow, I'll wake up to a life shaped not by fear or manipulation, but by choice. If the story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. Your likes, support, and kindness help me share more stories like this. There are plenty more waiting for you, and I've added 2 new favorites on the screen for you to explore. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one. With love, always.